Welcome aboard the Tabletop Express. My name is Chris Barrows, and you're here at the Creators Corner. I am joined today by Peter C. Hayward. Peter, welcome to the Express.
G'day, how's it going?
Good. I am really excited to have you here. This is, for me personally, it's funny because yesterday my co-conductor Ryan was talking crokinole with one of the makers of the best crokinole boards out there. I'm talking to you today, and it's funny because your game was That Time You Killed Me was number 2 on my list for 2021. So I was telling you this before. My apologies because Cascadia just kind of snuck in there.
No, look,
But
if you told me about it before I scheduled this, I would have been out. It's gold medal or nothing.
Yes.
Silver is for the weak.
Yeah. Well, I will say this: excited to have you because I think you designed a really interesting game, and I can't wait to talk about it. But before we jump into the design of that game and your just design process, I got to ask you what I've asked everyone on this show, Peter, which is, what is your board game origin story? Where do you find yourself, initially getting into board games, whether it be as a kid or later in life?
So as a kid, I did the classic, as I'm sure every single guest has said so far, played Monopoly and Risk and Scrabble and blah, blah, blah. As well as that, I don't know where I got this book or how I found it, but I think my school library had a book called like Design Your Own Board Game. And this was back in the olden times because I'm an old man, and so I as a young 11-year-old I got that book and I would sketch out, and it was how to make a roller, right? Because that was the only kind of board game that anyone really knew existed. But it was like make the spaces do something that's themed for the other spaces, and make some cards that when you draw them they do stuff. So I would sit there as a little industrious 11-year-old and sketch out these boards. Didn't even think about that for years, and then I was in my 20s, I think, when I used to host a game show, so like like Wheel of Fortune, but much lower tech. And we got a guest on who was a big YouTube celebrity, and I was a huge fan of his stuff. And I wanted to be friends with him. I thought he was so cool. So when he was like, "Hey, this was a really fun show. Are you a board gamer?" I was like, "Of course I'm a board gamer. Yes, I am. Yes, if you're a board gamer, I'm a board gamer too." And he's like, "Great. Well, we're playing Twilight Imperium tomorrow if you want to come." And I was like, "Love it. We'd love to." So my first hobby game was Twilight Imperium, which I won, by the way. Due to it was Twilight Imperium with no expansions, and I got very annoyed, even as a non-designer as I was at the time, because I just happened to draw the action card that's like, "Hey, keep your strategy card from the previous round." And I was on the strategy that gets you 2 victory points. So I just got an extra 2 victory points and won. And I quote unquote deserved the win. But at the time I was like, that's a stupid card. I don't like that. And so just playing board games with my friend. He later went on to become one of my best friends. We're still in touch every day. Just playing games with him made me get the bug. And so I started designing after that.
That's fantastic. It is funny how like one little conversation can lead to that. That's a hell of a first game though. How do you even prepare for that? I don't even know. It's interesting because the game that brought my attention in particular and made me say I got to have Peter on was a new game that came out from Pandasaurus Games. That Time You Killed Me. And I gotta ask you a little bit about this game, because the mechanics of this game, on paper you can look at it, and I think it's even in the rule book where you basically say this is in chess. Like it's even the rule book, like there's almost like a kind of a joke about it. But like on the paper, it's a game with 3 boards and you're moving pieces around. It's funny because you look at a photo, like it looks like this simple concept. And the way this game ramps up as you play it and gets harder and gets unique along the way is so cool. Where did the concept for That Time You Killed Me come from?
So it'll be utterly shocking to you to learn that it did in fact come from chess. It was 2019. I was in my office in Toronto and I was wildly procrastinating. I had some kind of deadline that I needed to be sitting down and working on it. So instead I was cleaning my office and watching YouTube. And I found this YouTube video, which was these 2 people. I think they normally, I'll try to find a link for you if you want. I think they normally do like inventions, like weird inventions. And it just was auto playing through their videos. And it got to them being like, let's play a game of 5D chess. So they set up 3 chessboards on top of each other 3 times in a row. So there were 9 chessboards, and they played, I think it took them 11 hours or something like that to actually like play a game to completion. And the whole time I was watching this, I was like, this looks horrendously unfun. This does not look like a good time at all. But I was like, I think I know how you could do this. And so it literally came from a video of 5-dimensional chess or 4-dimensional chess, 4-dimensional chess, where I was like, well, hang on, there's something there. It's not the monstrosity that they play, but there is something there that you could do that would be fun.
No, it's interesting because this game, I'll share a quick screen for those who are watching. I'll give a description for anyone who does end up hearing this via audio, but I think it's important to kind of get a visual of this. So let me pop that up on the screen for people. When you look at this, is the back of the box, everybody. You can see those boards right there, and you've got the 4 boxes that come in this, and it's a fun thing when you open the box, I think, and you see these 4 boxes. Ooh, what's in this? And it is an abstract narrative game, as the box describes, but you do start to say what is in these boxes, and there's an excitement to that. Was that something that was planned from the beginning, or was that something that kind of came as you went along in the design process?
So the original version of this game, it was almost exactly 3 years ago, because it came up in my Facebook memories of like exactly 3 years and 2 days ago. I pulled out the first ever version of this game, and it had boxes 1, 2, and 3 all in there. Because for me that was the premise, and I don't want to get too spoilery, but basically each of the first 3 boxes adds a new sort of set of components, and they all have different rules, and they all interact in different ways. So the first original version of the game was all of that all in at once, and my playtester's brain melted. And and my playtester, his name's Marek Tupi. He happened to be the one who first played it. He's a brilliant designer, one of the best designers I've ever met. He plays Lacerda games, like that's his style of game. So he's not averse to a heavy game, but this, like, not only trying to learn these, because there's the base game and then there's each of these modules. So 4 intersecting sets of rules.
Yep.
Trying to not only learn them, but play them in a zero sum, like you have to master these to beat another player. Impossible. And so he was like, hey, maybe don't put everything in there at once.
So it's funny. It is funny because that actually, that makes a ton of sense from playing it, because I introduced it to my son who's 8, and my son is now. We've gone through most of those to this point. We've done for them all. We've gone for all the boxes, and for the same thing, I'm trying not to say too much, because I do think that same thing. I think there's a journey you can go on in this game, but it's a blast to go for that experience of it. So I think the boxes add something. The fact was, though, for each of these boxes, you do add a new dimension to the game. So from a playtesting perspective, when you're doing something like that, what's the format in doing it? Because you got to have a set of people to then essentially play the first box and then go through the experience of playing through them. Or is it something where you try this one individually? I just want to get your perspective on this.
Well, it was probably about 4 or 5 months before I came up with the idea, and it's so obvious now, the idea of like segmenting it out and being like, let's just introduce the contents of the first box, then let's do the second box, then let's do the third box. So for a long time, I'm a big believer in a game saying, hey, here is the correct way to play this. I was actually just talking about it with the developer of That Time You Killed Me, Jeff Fraser, today. He bought some game, and he was like, in the rules, it's like, here's the turn-based version, here's the real-time version, here's the co-op version, here's the competitive version. And it's a pet peeve of, I think, a lot of designers, of just like, no, pick a game. You don't make me design a game. You pick the best version of the game and present that to me so I can play it. So I spent months and months and months trying to work out what was the best combination. So I tried just module 1. I was like, this is fun. I tried just module 2, and I was like, oh, this is also fun. And I tried 1 and 2 together, and I was like, this is fun as well, but it's too much. And so I was just trying, and then eventually I stumbled upon the idea of doing a campaign, which is obviously what we ended up with. At that point, I've been working on it for a long time, and I knew that for this game to be published, it would need to go through like real dev. Like really, like someone sitting there and grinding out 100 games of each of the boxes and that kind of thing. And I knew that I was perhaps arrogantly, I was pretty confident I could get this game signed, because everyone who played it was like, oh, you've got something here. So rather than fully develop all the things, I just focused a lot on the start of the campaign, and I would bring that to a convention and get every single person I could to sit down and play the first quarter of the campaign, something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering how that process would go, so that's fascinating to hear. What about the look and feel of the game? Because one of the neat things, as people could see earlier, was as you go from those boards, which are past, present, and future, by the way, for those who were wondering, you obviously see
it's
that
a time travel game. I don't know if you mentioned
yes,
that.
we should clarify that it's time travel. So as the time travel is happening, you're seeing that kind of that changing with the boards, but the art on the things that you've seen, it even the little pieces are just constructed in this unique little way. What did you go through from a design perspective, and how do you pick someone to help you kind of bring your creation to life in that way?
Yeah, so as well as being a designer, I'm also a publisher. So I do Jelly Bean Games. So we did Village Pillage, Lady and the Tiger. I think we're up to 15 titles at this point. Lots and lots of games. And so when I'm doing a game with Jelly Bean, I am the art director, and I have a very specific vision. And I find the person to execute it and all that. With That Time You Killed Me, it wasn't right for my brand. I knew that it wasn't a Jelly Bean game. And, I could dilute the brand to make a Jelly Bean game, or I could go with someone else. So I went with Pandasaurus because they have such a strong visual sense. So I went in saying, look, if you want me to art direct, I will so happily art direct. And they said, no, look, that's very sweet of you, but this is what we do. So I was pretty much hands off. I had feedback, of course. I had thoughts and opinions, especially on the UI stuff, because the prototype I presented to them, it was all, me mocking it up in design, but it was still very specific UI, very specific icons used to represent stuff visually, et cetera, but in terms of the art style and the boards, that was all their team. They did an amazing job of it.
Well, it's interesting because I do see that from an art style perspective, because I own, just an example, one that is by you and Kelly Joe, which is Ninjutsu.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a fun little game that we enjoy playing at dinner sometimes.
Right there.
It's such a fun little game in a small box. There's a lot of in that.
That's one of my absolute favorite designs. I just think it's my game, so I shouldn't say, but I just think it's just nifty. There's nothing else quite like it.
I gotta pull it. I think I have it right. I thought I had it right here.
I have it right here. We can make our copies kiss.
I had it a second ago. Here, hold on. Now it's bugging me because I know I had it here.
It's okay. I got it.
Yeah, there it is. That's the box. It's not huge, right? But it comes with a ton of cards. But the art in that, even again, like all the games that you've done, I think they just have this fun approach to them. So that one, I highly recommend that one personally, by the way. For those who are wondering, by the way, Jelly Bean Games, you can go to jellybean.games to see the variety of games that you've produced. What's interesting actually about your page, by the way, because I was on it earlier, I like is when you scroll down, it's very easy to see 10 and up ages. Like you can kind of get a quick grasp immediately for any of the games, which I think from a website design, when I'm looking to buy something, is really helpful, especially as a dad. As a dad, it's really helpful and critical. Let's talk about this though, because you did go Pandasaurus, but from your own design perspective, what has that journey been like for you? How have you grown and challenged yourself as a designer? And ultimately, when you decide to publish something, when do you know? Does something just click for you, or is it someone else kind of giving you that hint and you're taking it through the player feedback?
Yeah, so the line that I often use is a game's ready to publish when your players insist on playing it again. Not agree to play it again. Not like, hey, do you want to play again? Oh, sure, if you want. When they're like, hey, can we please play this again? So Werewolves of Wall Street, That Time You Killed Me. Sorry, directly before this interview, I was in a playtest for a different game called Werewolves of Wall Street. So That Time You Killed Me, double-digit playtesters were like, can I please buy a copy of this game right now? And like that game is probably in my career, I've had about 4 or 5 games that have really, like, people have been like, I want a copy of this very moment. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a sign of like, you really, that it's like ready to go.
We do have a comment here. Lady and Tiger's great fun. The artwork is amazing too. Been playing it, enjoying it on BGA lately.
Oh, great.
So there's one. We do have a question that did come in that I wanted to ask you. A little off the cuff, but I love it. It's not board game related, but it's perfect.
It's not board game related. I'm not answering it. I'm here for one reason, Chris. One reason only.
I think you'll like this one. I really do. Do you have a favorite time travel movie or show?
Oh, just one. So I'll tell you that I have a favorite subgenre of time travel, which is the loop. I love me like a Groundhog Day, Palm Springs. What's the Tom Cruise one? It has 2 different names. Live, Die, Repeat. What's the other name for that one?
It's slipping my tongue right now.
It's tomorrow something. Anyway, that one. So I think Palm
Edge of
Springs,
Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
There it is.
They're like the time loop genre is just incredible. I just love time loops. So I'd have to probably go Palm Springs out of all of those because I'm such a huge romantic comedy fan, and like I love Adam Sandler, not Adam Sandler, Andy, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Every name is slipping my brain today. So yeah, I'd have to go with something like Palm Springs. In terms of pure time travel, I don't think you can beat Back to the Future. Back to the Future is just incredible, just an incredible film. I had a debate with a friend actually because we realized that Christmas Carol is a time travel story.
It is. That's true.
Because he goes to the future and he sees his future, and based on seeing the future, he changes his past. And it's like, yeah, that's time travel. And so that one, the Muppet Christmas Carol especially, is another classic.
That is my favorite of all the Christmas carols, actually.
It's so good. It's the best Muppet film and the best Christmas Carol film. They just nailed that one.
Yeah, I would second that. I would definitely second that. So when you think about then design, it's really that those perspectives are always interesting. I am still fascinated by the fact that when you design something like this, it is vastly different than designing something that's a straight up game and everyone's going to stand up and play the same way every time. But you also designed a game, I think it's fair to say, that just has replayability. So how important when you made this was the replayability factor? Because yes, you've got this interactive, you've got this campaign experience happening in the sense of you're opening new things, but you are able to play this game over and over. It's not like you're gonna ever lose that replayability in the way it's designed.
That was something that so you said earlier that you haven't opened up all the content from the fourth box yet.
I have opened up about half of it, probably.
Yeah. So I'll give you a very, very minor spoiler warning, which is that there is in the last box, there is a thing that you open that says open this once you've opened everything else.
Yes.
And that there has almost like an entire game's worth of content. That one we poured so much, and I had to not that Pandasaurus were against it, but they were like, look, Peter, we can't put infinite dev time into this. And I just every time they gave me an inch, I took a mile. I was like, oh, we're adding this, we're adding this, we're adding this, we're adding this. I just wanted to get as much into that box because I dig deep on games. So my favorite game is Feast for Odin, which I've played 30, 40 times. And Feast for Odin has these 3 like sets of player powers, and I've only opened the first. I think I've just opened the second set. And I plan on playing this game, with my son when he's my age. I want to play this game forever. And so for me, having that high replayability is really important because that's the way I play a game. I dive super, super deep on it.
I like that. And I do think, again, when you talk about age for this one, I think this gets replayable across many ages. And I think that's the thing that you could start this pretty young. My son's 8, but I'd argue I could have taught him to him sooner. It is obviously a beautiful looking game. Talk about the publishing side of things. Obviously that's a big part of your life. And what you do at Jelly Bean Games. So when did you know you wanted to do that? And when did you make the jump really and know that it was ready to make the jump to actually be publisher? Because obviously that's a step that, is going to involve work on your time.
Yeah. So if I'm being honest, I made that step earlier than I should have. And my first few games, my second game, especially Dracula's Feast, which I really love in a lot of ways, we ended up doing a full reissue. So the original, actually it's on the shelf here. The original is Dracula's Feast. It's behind there. And then we remade it as Dracula's Feast New Blood. And that's because like the first one was very delightful in many ways, but it wasn't play tested as thoroughly as I wish I had done it. And so we sat down and we were like, look, this game is good. This game works. This game is popular. Let's hone this because we wanted to do the expansion. So we've done Night of the Mummy and we're potentially doing some more coming up. And we didn't want to have them integrate with a system that didn't quite work. So we went, I started publishing earlier than I should have, but there's no correct time to make the first step.
In the end, if it works out, I guess it's all good, right? But it is lessons learned, and that's something that I'm sure you can, talk to young designers about and those who are trying to get in. When it comes to games that you play, is there a favorite or two out there outside of what you've mentioned, some games that have hit the table for you lately that have caught your eye in the past few years outside of your own? Because I always find it fascinating what people are playing. And from a designer perspective, it's interesting because many I talk to will say, I'm so busy trying to test my own, I don't get to play as many. So it's varied from designer to designer in my experience.
Yeah, I definitely prioritize playing games. My son has just turned 4 in December, so he's at like the starting to play games age.
Yep.
And so I went out and picked up King Domino and Sushi Go, which are two games that are much beloved. Sushi Go by another Australian, and King Domino I tried for the first time back in 2017, and I was unimpressed. I just was like, I don't get what the appeal is. And then playing it again recently, I was like, oh, I don't know how I missed the beauty of this the first time. So getting to see it through his eyes is obviously wonderful because he's 4, and these are the first games he's ever playing. He plays Potion Explosion, he plays Sushi Go, he plays King Domino. So I've been playing those. I've also picked up Codenames Duet. Again, these are not like little unknown gems or anything like that, but oh, I love Codenames Duet. I love it, love it, love it. I've been playing that a bunch lately.
It is funny though. Does playing with your son, playing with family, give you some different perspective that you don't get from, say, playing with a playtest group at a con? Because there is something, I'm the first to say, having a son, there are games that I just love that I don't know I would appreciate if I didn't get the different perspective of my 8-year-old and seeing, oh, there's a real joy in this because this is so perfect for playing with, say, a young person. I like to think I'm young, but an 8-year-old, and there's something to it, and it does kind of change my perspective in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so recently I've been playing not only with my son, but also with some, I would call them non-gamers, people who, don't own any modern board games. But because they met me, they're like, you play games, come around and play games with us. I was like, okay, that sounds fun. So it's been really interesting because one of my priorities as a designer and as a publisher is just, this is going to sound obvious, but just make everything as simple as possible. So even my big, heavy games, I try to make every action that you can take completely self-contained and self-explanatory. And like, if there's a knock-on effect, it's very explicitly like, when you do this, this happens. So to use that time you killed me as an example, you get 2 actions in a turn. And every action is atomic. Like, one action happens and it completely resolves, and then a second action happens and it's completely resolved. So there's no like, and it's very easy to design it to be like, if you go 2 in this direction, then you get this thing or that. Whereas the more you can sort of break it down so that I think of it as like programming a robot. Writing a rule book is like programming people you've never met. And so the simpler you can keep each line of programming, the more likely they are to avoid conflicts.
Your rule book for That Time You Killed Me, though, has a lot of great examples in it. So there's no question, for example, of what an action is or how an action works. And I know there's a decent amount of pages in that, but every module is really clear. Is that a big part of then your design process also from a visual perspective to make sure, hopefully you don't feel the need to go, say, check a video on how something works or how an action goes?
Yeah, so this is something that I sometimes disagree with people I work with. I believe that a lot of people learn from rule books. I think a lot of people learn from rule books, and I know designers who are like, everyone just watches a video these days, and I'm like, no, like you're underestimating how many people will buy a game, open up the rule book, and play it as they're learning it, and that's, I think, incredibly common. And it depends on what circles you're in. Like, my circles tend to be the ones that learn it from rule books. Other people, learn it only from other people at conventions or only from YouTube videos, etc. So That Time You Killed Me, I wrote a pretty extensive rule book for, and then Jeff, who did a lot of the development on the game, is one of the best rulebook editors in the world. He's just phenomenal. So he took what I did and just polished it up and made it 100 times better.
And in the end, like I say, this game, for anyone's interested, what we've talked a lot about is That Time You Killed Me. But I want to just again remind people that please go check out jellybean.games. There are so many games, by the way. I was looking at this. Lady and Tiger came up earlier. I know the one that caught my eye when I was looking at this, I don't own it, was Jabberwocky immediately. I'm like, I just want I want to see that. And a lot of variety in the people you've worked with and the types of games. And so that what I found really interesting was it's not like you just work with one type of game. You're jumping around the genres of gameplay mechanisms. So is that something that you enjoy doing from your own experience, or just in looking to provide some diversity out there in the collection of games that you do provide? Because really, as I looked at your list, wide variety there.
Oh, thank you. My favorite designer is Vlaada Chvátil. Just think the man's an absolute genius. And as you may know, he made Codenames, one of the best, simplest games of all time, and he made Through the Ages, one of the most complex, beautiful, heavy Euros of all time. Mage Knight, for a long time, was my favorite game, and that is a 3-hour sit-down, crunch numbers until your brain burns game. Codenames is a game I've played with my 87-year-old aunt and a 4-year-old in the same game. It's incredible, the scope. So I really admire the way that he does it. As I said, for me, the focus is no matter what weight of game I'm doing, I try to adhere to the same kind of principles of making everything as atomic and self-contained, as simple and elegant and thematic as possible. This is all the dream. It doesn't always work, but so I enjoy, as I've said, Codenames to Mage Knight. I enjoy that entire range of games, and whatever I'm enjoying is what I want to design. If I'm playing a bunch of light games, I want to design a light game. If I'm playing a bunch of heavy games, I want to design a heavy game.
And then have you gone back? I have to ask, have you gone back to that first game you played again? Because obviously your first game was a heavy one, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, Twilight Imperium. I've only played the 4th edition once or twice. I played the 3rd edition probably about a dozen times, which, if you know the game, that's not an insubstantial amount of game time. And the thing is that, as much as I love a Twilight Imperium 4, if I'm spending a day on that, I could instead be playing, 2 heavy games or 3 midweight games or 5 light games. So I'm unlikely to go back and play a lot of Twilight Imperium 4 until my son is at the age where he's like, let's do it. But yeah, it's a bit of it's a bit much to get to the table regularly, unfortunately.
We do have a question. Ryan asked if you can briefly explain a little bit of a gameplay from one of the ones that he's been looking at, which is Dracula's Feast. You mentioned it earlier. Of course.
So Dracula's Feast, we call it a logical deduction game because it's not a social deduction game. You never have to lie. Instead, it's like sitting around a table and trying to solve a logic puzzle competitively against everyone else. So the theme is that Dracula's having a feast, and the feast is the local villagers. He's invited them up to his castle to eat them. However, a bunch of other monsters have come in, and they're trying to eliminate all the other monsters so that they can have the feast. So at the start of the game, you're dealt a monster. You could be Dracula, you could be Van Helsing, you could be the ghost, you could be the swamp creature, and every player has a unique power or a special thing that they do. So the ghost, for example, will always accept dances. I'm trying to remember them now. It's been a while since I played it. There's a shapeshifter character, and she will always pretend to be whoever you're asking that she is. If on your turn you can name who everyone else at the table is, so you have to work out every single other player, then you win. That's the victory condition. On your turn, you're either going to say, hey, Chris, are you the swamp thing? And Chris would hand me a yes or a no card. And unless your card says you can lie, you have to be honest. So if I get a no back, I'm like, oh, he's not the swamp thing. If I get a yes, I'm like, okay, he might be the swamp thing. Or he might be the witch who always lies to her neighbors. Or he might be the shape-shifting character, whose name I cannot remember for the life of me, who always says yes no matter what you ask. You can ask someone to dance. So I can say, Chris, would you like to dance? If Chris says yes, we will show each other our character cards. So now I know for certain who he is, but I've given away who I am. And so using this sort of like little things, you start to piece together whoever at the table is until suddenly you're like, I've worked it out. And whoever it is, you reveal your card, everyone reveals, and you win the game.
And the art is
the trickster.
Awesome.
That's the character, the trickster.
The art's also, for those who do listen to my audio, I'd encourage you to go look this up on Board Game Geek. This is New Blood, as you mentioned, that you had redone some things after the 2017 version. But yeah, that art is so much fun. I love the Dracula card. He looked really happy with that.
We went through about 5 different revisions with Dracula because I kept being like, more dramatic, and the artist was like, I don't know what you mean. Eventually I was like, oh, I want a low angle. He's like, oh, and it just all clicked into place. Chris, I do feel the need to publicly shame you. You have 406 notifications.
Oh yeah, that is true. It's subscription notifications. See, I gotta check there. Yeah, I do. Thank you for calling me out for that. I checked it live too because I was wondering what those were. Yeah, I'm assigned to way too many subscriptions. Clearly,
yeah, you got to get off that. I only have subscriptions for my games, so if you ask a question about one of my games on the BGG, I will see it and I will answer.
Well, yeah, I gotta wonder what the heck did I subscribe to? That's for another time. No one cares about that now. But no, I love this. And again, I go back to the art, the visual of all the games that I've seen that you're involved with. They look great, and it goes to show, I think, we're in an age when a lot of people talk about how a game looks. Obviously, it really matters how the game plays. How important, though, do you think the look of a game is in 2022?
Well, it depends on what your goal is. So if like Jelly Bean, you're a small publisher and you want someone to walk past the shelf and be like, "Oh, that one," you've got to invest in that art. You've got to invest in it. I think if you're Vlaada Chvátil, it's probably less of a priority, but there's no real downside. Like if you're going to make something, why not make something pretty? Why not make something that's as beautiful as you can make it?
I can support that. I have that same issue as I know sometimes. I try to get into Castle of Burgundy more and I just struggle a little bit, but I know it's a great game. So
someone's going to make a pretty version of that and make an absolute killing.
Yeah. Well, they came out with, I know, the new version and it didn't do too much more, but it's a great game. Fantastic game. And that goes to show it does not matter what a game looks like in the long run.
I've got the Castles of Making Ludwig remake coming because they redid all the art for that. And I'm really excited.
That does sound fun. There's so many good things coming out. Can you talk about the process of going through where you decide to do a game versus retail versus trying to work with someone on a Kickstarter, and how you've evolved in that process along the way? Have you ever actually done, when you think, I guess is what I'm asking, when you think is the time for a Kickstarter or a game found, I guess we're saying now, versus the straight to retail here in 2022?
Yeah, so it really depends on, like I said, your reach and more importantly, the kind of game. So one of the early games we did with Jelly Bean was a game called Show and Tile by Isaac Shalev and Matt Loomis. And it's a great little game. It's still probably the number one game I bring from our entire collection. With actually French Toast may have just supplanted it, which just came out. But for many years, Show and Tile was the game that I would bring for people who weren't heavy gamers, because it's just fun. It's simple and fun. It's puzzly. Everyone has a good time. So just a few months ago, I was invited to a friend's house for the first time to have dinner with her husband and meet her friends. And I brought Show and Tile and gave it to her as a gift. And we brought it out. And this is people ranging from, my age, from their 20s to my age in my 30s up until I think their 50s or 60s, all sitting around just having an absolute blast, like just enjoying the game. And so that game we brought to Kickstarter and it didn't do well because it just isn't a Kickstarter game. Like it doesn't have any flashy components. It doesn't have, it's a really solid, fun game, but that game should have gone straight to retail. But at the time, that was our, I think, fourth or fifth game. I think it was our fifth game. I didn't have any retail presence. That was the game that got us into retail, actually, because the retailers saw that and were like, "Oh, yes, please. Obviously, we want this. This is such a great game for retail." But the Kickstarter bombed. It's still our lowest performing Kickstarter, I think, maybe second lowest, because it's just not a good Kickstarter game, despite being magnificent.
I will note, by the way, Ryan, who's the co-conductor on this channel, did want, I believe he wanted me to make sure I mentioned that and learn more about French Toast, which you mentioned, which has, I was looking at the title, it looks great. that front cover of the French Toast and the little, I guess technically aliens. Is that what
they little aliens? So what's happening in that game is that aliens have come to Earth and they've captured some stuff and brought it back to their home planet. But the aliens back on their home planet, the only thing that they remember from Earth is French toast. So every time they're trying to describe something, they're like, well, is it more like French toast or more like a washing machine? Is it more like French toast or more like a bicycle? So in the game, you're constantly comparing things to French toast to try to work out what it is. So it's a guessing game where it's a word game where you've got a word. So I might have hat, for example. And my team, you can play it team versus team or cooperative. My team is trying to guess this word, but I can't answer questions. I can only compare objects. So if you said hammer, I'd have to go, okay, is a hat closer to a hammer or to French toast? I guess it's closer to a hammer. And then they're like, oh, it's something close to a hammer. Now, it might actually be close to a hammer, like a hat and a hammer are not that close, but it's closer to a hammer than it is to French toast. So then they might say dog, and I have to go, is it closer to a dog or to a hammer? Probably closer to a dog, etc., until they find the word. It's a lot of fun. It's really, I'm so proud of it.
What I loved about the description on that one too was it literally reads, one player acts as the Toastmaster, which just but sometimes words, that's all it takes, the right words. Speaking of the right words, I know that you do share some feedback out there for young designers. You podcast, you are there to support that, support the industry, not just obviously by putting games out, but by providing those insights. And what kind of advice do you give to those people who are saying, I want to design a game, I want to put something out there, and I just want to put something out there and have people have some fun. What do you tell those folks?
Yeah, so for designers specifically, the thing that I have increasingly learned, it gets hammered into me every time I ignore this rule, is if there's something that's a little off in your game, a little wonky, a little problem, if you ignore it, it'll come back 10 times. It's like feeding a gremlin after midnight. Feeding a what are they called before the gremlins? A Mowgli?
I've seen that movie once. This is where I'm going to fail trivia. My trivia team will fail on that one.
It's like feeding your cute fluffy pet after midnight. It's going to come back and bite you hard. And so if you have that little stumbling block, don't just pass over it, because as soon as that game goes somewhere, as soon as it gets published, it's going to destroy people's experience of the game. And it sounds dumb, it sounds over dramatic, but it's happened time and time again. You skip that last round of proofing, you're like, this combination of cards, it's going to come up 1 in 1,000 times, 1 in 10,000 times. If your game's being played 10,000 times, that means it's going to ruin someone's experience. So look out for that. And the second thing is, especially new designers are often like, this is unsolvable. I have found in my entire career of not only playing my games, but hundreds, thousands of prototypes at this stage, I've only ever found one problem that I thought was unsolvable. And the only reason I said it's unsolvable is because Eric Lang was like, I couldn't solve it. And I spent 2 months and I was like, okay, I think that one's unsolvable. Every other problem I've had with the game, I've eventually been like, here's the solution. Like, if you persevere, if you keep on looking for it, there's going to be some confluence of things, and you'll need extra eyes on it. Like, take it out, play it with people, they'll have a good time, and then be like, here's the problem, and just get thoughts, and you will eventually overcome whatever that problem is.
And it is taking feedback. You got to be ready for that feedback and be ready to hear it, I guess.
Yeah, don't attach your ego to your game, I guess, would be the other one. And because I come from the writing world, I think I'm pretty good. So I don't know if you know this, I wrote all the content of That Time You Killed Me. So all of the stuff in not the actual rules, but all the stuff around the rulebook, that's all my writing, because I'm a writer. And so I've come from that world. And so I spent 10 years learning that, like, you are not your game. If someone's criticizing your game, that is their way of saying, I love you, not I hate you.
It is funny, because when you do play this game, for anyone who takes the opportunity after this or has already done it, the little things that you've written, they make me chuckle. It reminds me of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy at times.
There's a specific Hitchhiker's Guide reference very early on, because I wanted to acknowledge that. At one point, the narrator calls you a frood.
Yes, it's so funny though, because just for people to understand with this game, like, you literally are time travelers, yes, but the person who actually loses the game was the real person who invented time travel, and it's great. The fact that, like, it literally, the way you write, I think in early on at some point, it's like, not you, murderer.
The theme of the game is that you and your best friend, the person who you're playing this game with in real life, will in the future invent time travel. One of you will invent time travel. The other one will murder them and steal your invention. So the reason that you're playing through this campaign is to work out which of you is the true inventor of time travel, and which of you is the one who murders your best friend to steal the invention.
The writing is very funny. I encourage people to make sure they read through all those cards. Not just because Peter's here, but quite frankly, because they honestly are great.
Despite Peter being here.
Well, I thank you for being here. Can you talk a little bit, because I know you do have a podcast coming off that last question, where you do talk about design, and it'd probably be very helpful for some folks.
Yeah, so my friend AJ Brandon and I have been hosting this podcast for a bit over a year now. It's called Fun Problems, and it's called that because A, designing is just solving a bunch of fun problems, and B, what you're designing is fun problems for players to solve. So if you just search Fun Problems in your podcast app of choice, or go to jellybean.games/fun problems, all one word, you will find all the episodes. Are you familiar with the show Taskmaster?
That sounds familiar, yes.
It's very good. Check out Taskmaster. But the next episode that's going live in the next 2 weeks is actually with the guy who created and hosts Taskmaster, Alex Horn. So if you haven't checked out Taskmaster, go check that out before you check out my podcast. But also check out Fun Problems everywhere that you find podcasts. We just give advice on game design, and I share theories, and AJ shares knowledge that he's learned over the years. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely encourage people to go there.
Not Greg Davies, Ryan. Alex Horn. Alex Horn's coming on.
Yeah, there you go.
Little Alex Horn. There
he is. By the way, I did see you earlier, Liz. Apparently I did mention this a lot, because she is apparently telling me that she did buy this at some point because I was talking about it. So Ryan did point Ryan, who you just saw, was pointing out that now he wants to play it too, because I've been talking a lot about this game.
It's on Tabletopia. You can play, I think, the first 3 chapters on Tabletopia for free.
Yes, and that is I have not done that experience yet, but if anyone's interested in doing that, happy to play along with you. Give you a chance to play and go through if you have any questions. But it's fun little game. It does not take too long either.
Keep in mind, Chris can't beat his 8-year-old at this, so you have a pretty good chance.
No, I've beaten him, but he's beaten me. No, I appreciate Peter. It's been great having you. I really do appreciate it. And I encourage everyone to connect up with Peter. I believe you can find Peter all over the internet. So Peter, where can folks connect up?
Yeah, Peter C. Hayward. That's Hayward. Peter C. Hayward on everything: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Not Tumblr. They deleted my Tumblr account because I pressed the wrong button at one point. But everywhere else, no one's on Tumblr anyway. I don't even know why I went into that. And any decent social media site that's not Tumblr, you can find me, Peter C. Hayward, talking about games and game design.
Love it. Thank you for being here tonight, Peter. Just so everyone knows, next week we do have the next in our top 20 series coming up. And that is going to be our top 20 favorite games right now. Ryan Espin went first. I am going this time. I will be joined. I believe Liz is here, who said definitely appreciate a good rule book. But Liz, I believe, will be joining me on that episode as well. So that'll be fun. So come hang out with us then next week, and more great stuff to come on Creators Corner. Just so you know, Ben and Matt, designers of Three Sisters, Fleet the Dice Game, etc., will be on as well in the coming weeks. So
you do have to specify, because there are multiple Ben and Matt design teams in board games.
Yes, well, Ben Pinchback, specifically Matt Pinchback. Actually, I'm saying Ben, combining their names now, but but yeah, we had, actually, you'd appreciate it, we did a playthrough. It was a really well attended video, actually, and we did a playthrough of Three Sisters, I think about a week after I came in. Great. And we had a lot of fun with that one. Great little roll and write. If you have not had, not little, little is not the right word. There's a lot in that box.
I'll have to check it out.
Yes, check it out. Peter, my thanks to you for joining us this evening. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in. And I thank you all for coming aboard the Tabletop Express. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks.